On today's show, how the Cleveland Cavaliers lost to the Sacramento Kings in Sacramento. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and the NBA for places like Down UpRocks and SB Nation's Fear the Sword. That man is Evan Dammarell. He is at Down Euclid and Fear the Sword. We are here as the Cavs have, for the first time this season, lost 2 consecutive games. Evan, the world is ending. The apocalypse
is burning.
The apocalypse is nigh. Ragnarok is here. No, the Cavs are fine. They lost. This is a bad loss, but let's talk about it.
Speaking of Ragnarok, just real quick, God of War Ragnarok. Whew, what a fun game. But yeah, this was definitely an loss for the Cavs. Not really much stock you can take too much from it. I think the Cavs just kind of got outplayed in the first quarter, and then were kind of fighting their way back into this game to the very end. And they remain competitive in the third quarter. I think there are some positives. I think a huge negative is just Darius Garland looking off, and at least according to Donovan Mitchell post-game, he was sick. So we'll see what his status is for Friday against Golden State, but my biggest takeaway is if this were the Cavs last year, they'd be DOA after that first quarter and possibly the second quarter as well. But Donovan Mitchell, more or less, again, that motor of his runs just super red hot, and he just does not like to lose. As you can tell, like JB Bickerstaff shared in the post-game once, that like he's just wired not to lose. And you kind of saw that front and center against Sacramento for the better part of the game last night. Is just, too little too late, especially at burying themselves in the first quarter a bit.
Yeah, like Karis LeVert was like the only guy to really play well for like much of the first chunk of this game. Like you look at the stat lines and it's like, okay, Mobley had 16 and 6, Allen had 20 and 7. Mitchell finishes with 38. Mobley has 6. LeVert has 21 on a 9 of 18 night, and he was 9 of 18 from the field, only 1 of 3 from 3. So like some of that 2-point stuff that he has historically been better at, you saw him kind of get into a flow. But like, I think like part of the reason you lose this game is just like this is a really off night for Darius Garland. 1 of 9 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3, 8 assists, 4 turnovers, 6 points in 34 minutes. So like he was not like, this was just like a straight up bad Darius Garland game. There's nothing about it that was really redeeming. And like for a team that they need him to distribute, they need him to just kind of be on point. They need him to make some shots as well for the offense to play function. And like, look, this is a guy that I think if you watched him play when he came back, his eyes still doesn't look like 100% great. He also certainly, I think you can look at this and say maybe like there's adrenaline in those first couple games when he comes back, and now he's trying to just get back into rhythm and stuff. Like this is a tricky thing to evaluate, but Garland was just off, and when Garland is off and, you start the way they did the first quarter, if you break it down, the Cavs shot okay. It's just the Kings shot like nearly 60% from the field. You're kind of like, you're just fighting a lot of uphill battles, and this is just going to happen sometimes. I think the JB Bickerstaff will be like annoyed about the defense. I don't think they'll feel particularly good about this loss in the grand scheme of things, but it's a loss that like you can wrap your mind around and just sort of how it happens without it raising like significant red flags.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a fair assessment about it, where it's similar in some aspects to the Clippers loss, where like there's not a ton of red flags. It's also just way too early in the season to say like, okay, the Cavs are DOA. They've gone from 8-1 to 8-3. Again, I didn't expect this hot of a start. I think Chris and I both said this isn't 100% sustainable, but we'll see how far Donovan Mitchell can take them. But there are going to be nights where the fit isn't perfect between him and Garland. And like Chris said, there's a little bit of clunkiness to it. Doug Garland was just off in general, and I think the Cavs turned to Donovan Mitchell, as they should have for the better part of the end of this game, and just leaned on him quite a bit to make sure they can get them to where they needed to be, which is a win. But I'm not too overly concerned. Now, let's say like this is a recurring theme for the next 5-6 games. So when they play the Warriors, when they play the Wolves, when they play Milwaukee later this month, like these are some big matchups. Like I know the Wolves may not have Rudy Gobert, but like that's a talented team they're going to be facing on Sunday in some khaki uniforms. But this is an interesting parallel just to kind of look at, like, yeah, it's not going to be perfect the first season. Like, yes, they kind of were firing on all cylinders for the first several games of this year, but there's going to be nights where it's off, and it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, I think when you're facing a Mike Brown coach team, the offense may struggle, but defensively they will know their assignments and they'll know where they need to be, and they will be well coached enough to understand what pressure points to press. And in Cleveland's case, the Kings pressed the right buttons to kind of unravel them and then build a lead in the first quarter that the Cavs kind of had to claw their way back from for the rest of the game.
Did you? I guess when I look at this, I think one other thing that has come to mind, let's talk about Mitchell for a second, because I have another point I want to bring up, and that I've been thinking about a little bit as this has gone on. But I think like Mitchell is just like, I've come away just so impressed with him, I think, game after game after game. If he was sick, like he says he's sick, and he still plays 39 minutes, 6 of 28 from the field, 6 of 14 from 3. I thought he said
Darius Garland was sick, but I could be wrong.
Excuse me. Garland's sick, okay, whatever. But like Mitchell playing 39, regardless, Mitchell playing 39 minutes, 6 of 20, 16 of 20 from the field, 6 of 14 from 3, 4 assists, 3 turnovers, 38 points. This guy has showed up every single night this year. Like maybe there's been the one game the other night where he was like, he was kind of, he's fine. He's been like more or less just like absolutely insane game in and game out. And like whatever you maybe he's playing at a new level, maybe he's just more, whatever it is, he has been awesome. And I think like even on a night like this, like you still come away just being like, I think, okay, like this team can weather a lot of this because of how good Mitchell's going to be, and you'd expect Garland is not going to be like that going forward. Like I still would feel very comfortable with kind of where they're at with these two.
Yeah, I would be comfortable too, and I think it's just going to be a process. It's not really going to probably click for the first couple games. It's going to take a while for these two to click, but like you said, I think Donovan Mitchell just being more of a seamless fit for the Cavs, and just the fact that I think the Cavs just found something that really works for them in terms of just how their offense flows and functions and everything in between. And the fact that just JB Bickerstaff empowers him, so it's like, okay, Donovan Mitchell running the point in Utah was super successful. Let us replicate that, because it's going to make it easier for the rest of our guys to get comfortable with him, and then they have to handle the hurdle of him and Darius feeling comfortable with one another. So, again, it wasn't perfect, but that's, again, just to circle back from my takeaway from this, primarily from this game, is thank God the Cavs had him in this game, because it would have been a hell of a lot more uglier and a lot more of a frustrating loss for Cleveland if they didn't have Donovan Mitchell out there. And I think he kind of keeps things steady for them, at least on offense. Like, the defense is starting to kind of unravel a little bit, just because the Cavs are probably asking him to do a lot on offense. And as you mentioned, he played 39 minutes last night. His minute totals are just super extreme to start the season, and Bickerstaff's leaning on him quite a bit. So we'll see. I think, like you said, Darius missed the better part of 2 weeks. The eye's still not right. He's sick. We can keep listing all these things that are just kind of working against him. He hasn't played, clearly, and I think that's just going to be a work in progress, and we probably shouldn't crucify him for having an off night, because it's understandable for him to have an off night as he kind of ggets right and gets comfortable with this new system the Cavs are developing.
This is an 82-game season. You're going to have nights where you're just like, didn't have it. You're on a road trip. Like that just, this happens. This is part of the process. The other thing I would say, my brain just like shut off. So, all right, we're going to come back. We are going to dive into the rotation. Like the Cavs, I am in a bit of a funk at the current moment. So this is what I was going to say was, like, the Kings had like De'Aaron Fox made a sensational defensive play on Donovan Mitchell late in this game. Like, maybe the best defensive play in my, like, I obviously don't watch the Kings like night in and night out, but like I don't think of him as like a good impactful defender. He made a sensational contest on a Donovan Mitchell drive that I was like, oh, okay, like if he's going to do stuff like this and be motivated and be engaged like that on a night where Fox only had 15 points and whatever, like, you know what? That's going to happen. Tipper kept the Kings and you move on. All right, after this break, we're going to come back. I'm going to bring up maybe just a little question about the Cavs' depth and how many guys they are playing at this current moment, because I wonder if that has a little bit to do with this as well. But going to tell everyone first about our friends at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. To help you be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates, you need LinkedIn Jobs. You check out LinkedIn Jobs. They're going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All it takes is filling out the right information and clicking a few buttons, and you'll be searching for that next great team member. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Finding the right team member is paramount to ending the year strong, and you need the right tools to do it. LinkedIn is that tool. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, back here on Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Evan, I'm going to run through the minute totals and the guys who actually played meaningful minutes against the Sacramento Kings on Wednesday. Caris LeVert played 38 minutes. Evan Mobley, 35. Jared Allen, 32. Donovan Mitchell, a second under 39. So I'm going to say he played 39 of your possible 48 minutes. Garland played 33. You get to the bench. Kevin Love, 21. Cedi Osman, 15. Dean Wade, 14. Isaac Okoro, 6. And then Robin Lopez plays the kind of an afterthought 3. I do wonder a little bit, and I understand, like, maybe, like, this is just like, look, I don't trust all the guys on my bench, whatever it is. This is just this, if I'm nitpicking a little bit here, the minute totals are high for this point of the year to me. They feel a little high to me.
And it feels, again, there's a reason why I'm talking in a podcast right now on a 5-day scale and not coaching an NBA team in any capacity, but it feels like JB Bickerstaff maybe isn't learning from some of his bad habits and kind of what sabotaged the Cavs season at times last year, where he leaned too heavily on a couple set of guys and he didn't really diversify his list. And granted, your list right now is an injured Ricky Rubio, Isaac Okoro, Cedi Osman. We'll just throw in Lamar Stevens in there as well, Robin Lopez and Hollow Neto as like the back end bench guys, the guys who kind of get spot minutes as well. And it's a lot of it is pressing and trying to figure out what does and doesn't work. And I understand using the regular season to evaluate these things, because obviously winning as many regular season games is great, but it should never be your end game when you're an NBA team. But it was a little disheartening to see just the Cavs lean so heavily on a couple guys. And again, I circle back to Donovan Mitchell a lot. Like, the Cavs have leaned on him a ton. Like, I'm going to have to pull up his minute totals as we talk here. But he is just playing out of his gourd, but he's also averaging like 31.9 minutes per game. Or sorry, that's points per game, excuse me. He's averaging 39.2 minutes per game, which is a career high, and almost 6 more than he played at the Jazz last season. So I get it, the Cavs are leaning on Donovan quite a bit, but I think you maybe need to scale that back just so you don't burn him out or burn out his legs, especially when he's kind of dealing with a knee or ankle issue as well. So you want to just kind of be cognizant of that so you don't end up in the same situation you did as you get closer to the All-Star break, where guys are just showing wear and tear and breaking down a lot more quicker than you probably want them to.
You can, like, this is, I look at this as just like an 80, we've talked about this a ton. This is an 82-game marathon, and I think if you want Mitchell fresh for the playoffs, if you want Mobley, like, who have to play a ton of minutes last year just to be as fresh as possible, like, yes, these guys are young, they're in their primes, like, Mobley's pre-prime, all that stuff. You kind of just, I think, got to just, like, kind of keep them fresh as possible can. And look, like, Caris LeVert comes into this year saying he's really healthy, feeling really good. It's playing 39 minutes for him, like, and playing as heavy minutes as he has. Obviously, some of that due to Garland's injury. Like, is that optimal? I don't know. Right now, if he's playing 35.5 minutes a game, according to the Basketball Reference, he's never played before this, Evan, more than 31.6 per game. And look, this brings up the question, and I think this is like maybe the answer to what we're kind of talking about here is like, how many of these guys beyond who we're seeing does JB trust? Like, we haven't seen Lamar Stevens sans one game where like they had some guys out and just needed
a cup of coffee.
Yeah, needed to play some bodies against the Pistons, whatever. Like, you're down Ricky Rubio, so you have an open roster spot. So this team has 13 players, and Bickerstaff really feels comfortable playing like 6 of them, and then it's like, okay, Jetty, Dean Wade, Okoro, maybe Robin Lopez. And, like, even those guys beyond Love are not playing, like, a ton of minutes. Like, I just wonder, like, again, you're going to sacrifice some short-term, like, quality for some of that, but I wonder if there's just, like, a long-term... I wonder if there's just a long-term view that maybe you take. And look, maybe this is just, like, I don't know how many of these guys on the back end of the roster he really trusts. Like, I don't really still believe he trusts Jetty all that much.
No.
Like,
Jetty Osman is kind of showing that he's coming back down to earth a little bit, too, so...
Yeah, and, like, he plays Jetty like a very few minutes just because it's like, okay, we need defense, and then it's like Okoro has to do that. This is to me, like, I know people I'd liked a lot of the depth signings in the summer. If you're looking at how this builds out and how the Cavs can build this out as best as they possibly can over the next couple of years. The depth on this team and getting to like a real 8 or 9 to me, and maybe Dean Wade is that.
It's a work in progress.
That to me is the mission of Kobe Altman, is how do you build out real depth and get to a place where you have like 8 rock solid guys that you can go to battle with in the playoffs, right? And have 10, 11 guys in the regular season help you manage that regular season. I think that to me, there's like 4 takeaways before that about how good this team could be from the early part of the season. That to me is probably number 5. I just think the depth here is not quite where you would want it to be.
No, it's not where you want it to be at this juncture, for sure. You want to obviously maybe evaluate things a little bit more, maybe not put the cart in front of the horse quite quick, because there were things that were working before the Cavs hit this 2-game losing skid, and I don't think there's a lot of substance in this 2-game losing skid to really say, like, okay, this is screaming in our face. It's not like watching the Cavs running point with Kevin Pangos last season after Ricky Rubio went down and Darius Garland is out due to COVID. Like, yeah, that's more of an immediate need. I think this Cavs team is pragmatic. They're patient. They evaluate things, or this organization rather, and they will figure out the next steps clearly, but it may not be immediate. I think they'll try and see what they look like when guys are a little bit more healthy, when they're a little bit more balanced, but this is a very top-heavy Cavs team, and I think that's just been kind of the quiet concern when it comes to what this Cavs team has and what they can be. It's going to be a work in progress at the end of the day. Like, that's all you can do, and maybe you just keep evaluating things, figuring it out. Then when they get closer to the trade deadline, maybe you go make a swing for a more high quality backup wing if it somehow becomes available, and you consolidate some of your assets, because yeah, Karis LeVert's been great, but Isaac Okoro hasn't been great. Like you said, Jetty Osman may not have the full trust of the coaching staff. You combine those two, and maybe you include Dylan Windler as well. Like, that could get you something at the trade deadline if you include draft picks, because you don't have a ton of assets. It's just you kind of have to be pragmatic about this and pick and choose your battles of when you want to make changes to the back end of your rotation, because you also don't want to rock it too much either, because if you have Karis LeVert, who we mentioned as a trade chip, but he's also kind of an integral piece to this rotation, like, you don't want to rock the boat too much and kind of mess up what's working. Maybe you just look at the edges and see if you can do something there instead. Yeah, and even, I forgot, I kind of just, like, the Windler thing just goes, so, like, the Cavs functionally have, like, 12 guys that are healthy enough to play basketball in their roster right now. Plus the 2As, but those guys... And Diakite is the only 2-way with them, and he has hardly played, obviously.
Yeah, and, like, look, even if you want to say, like, okay, a 2-for-1 on a trade, like, that, like, yes, I can understand that, but it's also, like, okay, then you're down another roster spot. Like, and you might have to go, like, find someone off the scrap heap just to, like, fill out your roster. Like, this is, like, I think this is part of the reason why we always kind of thought maybe this is partially, like, a transition year, and then they've come out the gates really strong and they're clearly very good. But I still think in that context, this year feels like a year where you're building towards the peak of what this is, because Mobley's year 2, because the depth isn't there, all that stuff. All right, one more break. We're going to come back, and we're going to play a little game that Evan is going to explain right after this. Back here on Locked On Cavs, I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Evan, explain this exercise we are going to do to our listeners/viewers.
So, if you're a regular listener to this show, and you play bingo or something, Chris and I will always say we need 10 to 15 games to fully evaluate where the Cavs were at just at the start of the season, or just like if there's a change or a rotation change, yada yada, so on and so forth. Cleveland's at 10 games into the season, and we have a group text set up with editing boss and supreme just champion, the merriest Jake of Jake Stevens, where I said, okay, let me ask you this. Who is the most consistent Cavalier in the starting five, and who has, like, I said deadliest, or we'll just put it in a different way, like, who has the greatest potential to just, like, wreck a team with their offensive game? And Chris can talk about it, but I'll give my rankings off the spot for at least. We'll talk about consistent first.
Yeah, let's just do one and then the other.
We'll do consistent first. So the most consistent for me at this point in this season, it's Jared Allen 1, Donovan Mitchell 2. Pulling the list up in front of me, just make sure I get my 3 through 5 correct. It is, so yeah, Jared Allen 1, Donovan Mitchell 2, Darius Garland 3, Evan Mobley 4, Karis LeVert 5. Where just Mobley has been showing some signs offensively, but then there's other games where he isn't showing it and he's making an impact elsewhere. So you can nitpick with me if you want, but Donovan Mitchell's been awesome. I think he deserves to be 2, and he's been consistently awesome for the first 10 games. But Jared Allen, just night in and night out, is a guaranteed double-double for you. And Garland is just, I throw my hands up because he had a bad night against Sacramento last night, and I just don't have enough data on him to really say, like, okay, this is where he ranks. And then Karis LeVert's just the fifth banana in this offense, and will remain the fifth banana in terms of consistency because he just may not get those touches that he needs some games.
So I'm going to have Mitchell number 1 as consistent, and I'm going to give him the edge around just because there's more output, and then it's more consistent output. He is able to sustain himself in a way that, like, Allen just kind of isn't, based on his position and his skill set. So, like, I would put Mitchell 1. I think Allen 2 is fair. And I think Garland 3 is fair. I think the rest of that list is right. I would have Mitchell 1 just because I think what he does is so under his control. And while Allen is very consistent and, like, is going to get you a very kind of standard set of things most nights, and Mitchell just kind of creates that for himself.
I agree with that. It's just, for Mitchell, for me to be number 1, it's just sometimes he's going to have a bad game, or he's going to have an off shooting night, and, like, the Cavs kind of have to force feed him a little bit on offense to get him going, which is fine, but it's just a little bit of that uncertainty, and I think just the unfamiliarity of how, like, Cleveland truly functions, where I just can't say, like, okay, Jared Allen is the most low maintenance member of this big core four, whatever you want to call it, for the Cavs. But he's just consistently providing you defense. He's providing you interior offense, rebounding, and maybe some assists every now and then. So I think 1 and 2 is a flip-flop at the end of the day. Like, you can make an argument for either, and I think you did as well, but I'm glad we're in agreement at least on the back end of things.
Most deadly. I think number 1 is kind of clearly also Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, that's who I have number 1 on mine, is Donovan Mitchell, just with how hot his motor's been running offensively all season for the Cavs. It's impressive to see how hard he's been playing, and it's just like he's the most deadly. And I think when he just kind of dropped 41 against Boston, that really put it in perspective. And then, like, he had an off night the following night, but, like, still has that potential, and teams have to be honest when they're defending him, especially on the perimeter.
Garland is 2, I think.
Let me pull up my list. I also have Garland 2. I think Garland he's an all-star. He is technically the lead guard for this Cavs team, despite Donovan Mitchell just kind of really taking some stuff over at points. But it's been very impressive. But Darius Garland, I think when he hits his apex, has the potential to be number 2 no matter what, in terms of just like an offensive system.
The shot making is just good. Is so good. And when he's kind of extremely on, that is... it levels him up above some of the guys. And I think when you get to 3, this is where it gets a little tricky, because I think there's a case for LeVert at 3, because LeVert can put up a 41-point game like he did against the Celtics and be that good in that way, right? And
I disagree.
Mobley, well, I mean, look, this is just the reality of where Evan Mobley's at in offense. Evan Mobley can have the game like he had the night where he's getting a lot of dunks and he's getting inside and he's putting up 26 points. He doesn't do the shot making stuff that like LeVert can do, where he's like maybe gonna pull a game off like that. Like I think there's a case for Mobley, but it's like I'm favoring in terms of just like deadly, and in terms of like just pure scoring upside. Like Mobley it's like you have to feed him and get him going, and LeVert can create his own. I'm not saying I'm putting LeVert at 3. I'm saying I don't think it's like a crystal clear cut case for me, just because of where Mobley is at in his offensive development.
That's fair. I think it's because I have Mobley 3 on my list, and I just think it's the two-way potential for me at that point, where like he can be so impactful on everywhere on the floor, but also like you saw the game against the Lakers, like he had a monstrous performance, or you saw the game against the Clippers, like he played very, very well despite the Cavs losing. Like there's encouraging signs. It's just, and I think that's where I agree with you, where you can flip-flop this a little bit, that LeVert has just more of a refined offensive repertoire, while Mobley's still trying to find his game out there, which I think that's 100% fair.
So you say, because you said 2A, like this is an offensive exercise, correct?
It is an offensive exercise, but I do factor in just the fact that like Mobley's defense does lead to offense more often than not for the Cavs.
Okay, fair. All right, then I think Allen at 5. Allen at 5.
I just don't think you'll ever see Jared Allen like dropping 30, 40 points unless it's just like the Cavs are absolutely force-feeding him on every possession. It's not going to be like Eddie Tavares or Walter Tavares just like going absolutely off because he's the only big guy and really the most consistent offensive threat that night or something. It's just like there's so many other players, and it's Mitchell and Garland at the end of the day, that like Allen's not going to get like 20, 30 shot opportunities to really just level up in that regard.
I'd almost put Kevin, if like Kevin's Love is not in this exercise because this is about the starters, but Love would almost be ahead of him for me, just because Love can like rip a couple threes, and it's gonna like unlock things in your offense and kind of loosen things up, and it feels like the Kevin Love 3-point barrages feel so impactful in the moment, and maybe that's like weighting it for me, but that's where my head went.
No, I think that's fair, and if we expanded this to the bench as well, I think you can make an argument for Kevin Love or maybe Dean Wade, because Dean Wade could have a lot more potential offensively because he's just going to get so many open, clean looks because of Mitchell, Garland, and everybody else on the floor. But yeah, I think just in terms of the starting 5, it's Allen is last, but if you expanded this to the bench, you could easily make an argument for Kevin Love just because of the shooting and just a little bit of the variables as well that he provides on offense.
All right, we're going to end it there. This has been your delayed recap and analysis of Cavs Kings from Thursday night. Thanks again for making
those road trips.
Can't wait till it's over. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. This episode was, as always, produced by Jake Stevens. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant analysis, reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Chris. That's Evan. Talk to you next time.